Welcome to Vision Plus.
Winter and fall. This one's Build a Better You, starting now. It's just a book about how we can decide after our daughter got killed and other things. Other daughter got breast cancer. It's not what happens to you, but how you deal with that, how the Lord works in your brain. We have to truly trust in the Lord with all our heart, lean not upon our own understanding. In all our ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct our paths. And whatever things you desire, when you pray, believe that you have them and you shall have them. You know how that is, not today. It's usually not today. But I just love reading the scripture. That's just my joy in life. Wasn't always like that. There was a time when I liked to want my own way, real controlling. Now Tony's not here, so I could say he had an appointment, had to leave, but he might tell you that.
Right.
I almost dropped Mr. Scott Franks, our guest today. Scott Franks is a preaching minister at the Burnt Hickory Church of Christ in Marietta, Georgia. That's not too far from where part of the tornado went at Ringgold, Georgia, that my brother was at East Brainerd Church of Christ. And if you just keep going south, there you'll find Ringgold, Georgia, just kind of outskirts of Chattanooga. And this man has something that you're going to love. And welcome, Scott Franks.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I want you to tell me what you told us at church last night, because Brad Cox had you as our visiting professor preacher.
Right.
And it was, it touched my heart so much, because I've just gotten back from an area of Phil Campbell, where here in Alabama, that one of my students, I used to teach in a high school and then in college. Anyway, her house was wiped out. Her church was wiped away. She said, at least we don't have to clean off the slab. But you had a few things happen to you. Tell us a little bit about what you've been through in your lifetime, especially when you wondered what's next.
Well, a lot of that came to a head in 1998 when I lost my job, and I was unemployed for half a year at that point. And at that time in our lives, in our marriage, we had a 2-month-old baby, and my wife had to leave the baby behind every day and go to work, and she was the one that's supporting us. And I was really I was lost at that time. I was
Not
trying to decide.
Lost by the Lord, but
No,
in your brain.
no, just trying to decide what I needed to do. Just really frustrated with myself, frustrated with God, wondering what was supposed to come next. And as hard as that time was, looking back, I do think that in some ways losing that job was a gift of God, in that it did help me come to terms
Losing
with.
a job could be a gift of God.
And I think it can. I think it can. It just helped me come to terms with some misconceptions I had about what was really important, and maybe about what God wanted from me. And so that, to explain to me how that happened, or just what I've learned from that, probably the best thing I could tell someone who is unemployed, who is just wondering, what God is doing. I think one misconception I had, or one bad view I had, one untrue view I had of myself, was that my identity was defined or tied up in what I did. I identified myself, I defined myself by my work. And so my job was who I was. And that's very typical of a lot of men. I think men especially. Two guys meet each other. The first question is, what's your name? The second question is, what do you do? And so we define ourselves by what we do. And when a man who is thinking in that way loses his job, whether it's through being laid off, whether it's through retirement, it can be devastating, because they felt like they've lost their identity. They've lost who they are. The problem with that is, if you dig down beneath that, what you realize is what you're saying is God made you to be a paycheck. You're just a paycheck. And if that's all you are, when you're no longer a paycheck, when you no longer bring that home in the envelope, you're nothing. You've lost everything. And that's really wrong. And I really regret that my family had to go through that with me, Because what happens is when you come home and you're no longer a paycheck, you feel like you've got nothing else to offer. And what I know now, and what I would express to those of you who are perhaps unemployed, is first and foremost, you're a child of God. That's what defines you. That's where your value, that's where your purpose comes from. It's from God. It's not from what you do. It's not from the office. It's from God. That's where you start in terms of defining your value, defining your purpose. And so you're more than a paycheck. That was the first thing I wish that I had known.
I wish I could have realized that. I don't know about Sherry, your wife, but I remember the day that Tony came home. He's a Penn State graduate engineer and worked in engineering really all of his working life since he was out of high school. But I remember the day he came home. We were having a group of people at our house, and it's 9 o'clock in the morning. He goes to work early. And Tony shows up. And I look at him, and I think, what are you doing here? And that's my thought. I don't know if I said that. Can't remember if I said that. But I thought, what are you doing here? It's 9 o'clock in the morning. We're having a meeting. What are you doing here? He said, I thought I would just join the meeting. It took him months. He sent out so many resumes, so I understand, but I was kind of sick inside thinking, what are we going to do? How are we going to make the payments? How are we going to have food? We better not eat too much because we won't have any food left. And it was he ended up starting his own business because he couldn't get a job at that time.
Yeah.
So many months went by. So now you were born in Montana, where he loves to go to hunt, and then you weren't always a preaching minister.
No.
So tell us about your lifestyle till you got up to the point of living.
Well, it's kind of a mess, and that's to be honest, that's part of the reason why when I did lose my job, I always struggled so much, is because I think for a couple decades of my life, I really did not know what God wanted me to do, and so my resume is pretty messy. I've got a bachelor's degree in business management, a master's degree in creative writing. Grew up in rural Montana, and so I've been working some sort of job since I was in 5th grade. So everything from, herding cattle to baling hay, printing T-shirts. Worked at a farm supply store. Taught college English. I've done just a little bit of everything, and none of it is linear. None of it put together makes sense. I will tell you though, when I was in my early 30s. Probably the turning point when it finally clicked for me. I've always been a part of church, and I have always been active in church, thank heavens, and that was from the influence of my parents. I had done a announcement at our church when we lived in Chattanooga, and that's the first time I'd stood up in front of the congregation before. And then after that, the minister took me out to lunch. He said, you'd make a great involvement minister. And I said, what's an involvement minister? I had no idea what that even was. And then it was probably just a few weeks after that, I got a call from a friend in Houston who was a preacher. And he said, hey, I'd like to come down and talk to me and the elders about being an involvement minister. And that's when I first realized, maybe all these experiences, as disjointed as they seemed, all these false starts, all these falling backwards into jobs, maybe God is doing something with that. And truthfully, it wasn't until I was in my mid-30s that I could look back and connect the dots and finally see that, all these different places I had lived, all these experiences I had, even though some were negative, I could see where God was connecting those dots to prepare me to be a minister. And a lot of things that I had experienced then, I found I could use in ministry, even that period of unemployment. It was during that time I was unemployed that I probably...
Were you married to Sherry at the time?
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to hear about that old car and that period of time too, so we don't want to leave that out.
Oh, the old car, okay.
And not married, a single guy.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
But anyway, go ahead, and you're on the string of.
Well, what I was just going to say was, again, go back to unemployment. Be open to what can happen while you're unemployed. My other advice would be open to how God can use you, or what God might be trying to tell you in that time. The gift of unemployment, as many things as it takes away, what it does give you is time. For the first For the first time, perhaps, you have more time for your kids. For the first time, you have time to maybe, reconnect with old friends, pursue your family genealogy, all those things that you didn't have time to do when you're working 60 hours a week at the office. For me, what the gift was that I, for the first time, had time to teach a class at our church. And it turned out I really enjoyed it. And so I was remembering I was getting excited. It gave me something to do. It gave me a sense of purpose in that time when I felt like I had no purpose. And so I'd teach my class on Sunday morning. I was getting some good feedback. By Sunday afternoon, I was working on the next week's class. And that's the first time I thought, maybe I have a gift for teaching. And so that time of unemployment, when I was starting to teach a Sunday class, which I had not done before, was what opened the door, maybe planted the seed that maybe I could do something in ministry. And I still didn't do it for several years after that, but that was the first time that idea was planted in my head. So again, be open to what God can do with you while you're unemployed, because that gift of time, that gift of finally being out of everything else that wrapped you up before, that might be a time when you can really listen to God, where God can maybe the first time really have your attention and guide you to what He wants you to do. So it's something else I want to just tell those who are unemployed, is just be open to what might be happening.
Now, you were called by the people in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
You actually went to Houston? Did you actually work there?
Yes.
Yes. Were an involvement minister?
Yes.
Got to take people to lunch and
yes.
Get them
There's lots of lunches. Yeah. Yeah.
That was one of the joys of one time. This person at one place we were, he called and said, "I'm the involvement minister," which I'd never heard that term before. Mm-hmm. And he said, "We'd like to take you and Tony to lunch." And I thought, duh, I like this plan. But that was the little tipping point to get us to start going to that church at the time. Because Tony being in the Marine Corps, we've had 26 different houses and churches in our lifetime. Of course, we've been married since Methuselah was here, or quite a while anyway. And so you now are called. How did they think of you as an involvement minister if you've been doing all these other things?
I think more than anything, it was my friend. Well,
yes.
And again, you can kind of see how things, looking in hindsight, how things kind of connect together. The guy who called me, my friend Sean Smith, knew me from Oklahoma. For a while, I was the dean of students at a college, and he was the campus minister at a nearby church.
Which college?
At Oklahoma Christian University in Edmond, Oklahoma.
One of my relatives, Don Gardner, was there at one time.
Okay.
And so I know.
Okay, that name sounds familiar.
Claude Gardner was another one.
Yeah.
So you teaching there, and then he knew about it, and is that where you met Brad Cox?
In Houston, yeah.
You know that is Dr. Brad Cox.
It is.
Do you
I know.
realize that?
I know.
We got to call him Dr. Brad.
He makes us call him that every time. Yes.
And anyway, is that where you met him?
Yes.
And so he knew about your train.
Yes, Sean and I had crossed paths in Oklahoma and worked together for a while with those college students. And in some ways, what I was doing as the dean of students at Oklahoma Christian, I mean, there were some pieces of ministry there because it was a Christian campus. And so I guess that's what prompted him. I think more than anything, he wanted to bring together a staff of guys that he liked, that he wanted to work with. And so really what I had was all on-the-job training. I did not have any practical ministry experience with that. But again, I do credit that to
Oklahoma Christian.
Yeah,
you had
yeah.
that experience.
But I do think it was
dean of students. That's even more horrific than the whole.
It is. It is.
I feel sorry for Dr. Brad so many times because we just call him for the silliest thing.
Yeah.
I know it's silly, but we still don't know who else to call.
Yep.
So that's what we do to the Scott Franks of this world. And anyway, you're now in Houston, and then how'd you get to Marietta, Georgia? Don't tell me you drove in a yellow Cadillac. I asked someone.
No.
What was that transition time?
Well, we were there for 2.5 years in Houston, and then our church that we attended prior in Oklahoma when we were going to college and afterwards called me about a position to be an education minister. So basically my responsibility there was to oversee all of the adult and children's programming with the Sunday schools. And that was the part of ministry that I really enjoyed the most, was the teaching aspect. And so because of that, and also because it would bring us closer to my wife's family, we took that position. So I was there for 5 years. And then 4 years into that time, again, I can't explain it. I guess it's a God thing. I felt sort of a tug to preaching. And I'd had a few opportunities to do some preaching, but not on a regular basis. And so we just decided, for some reason I can't explain, to be honest, it felt right. We should look for a preaching position. And that's when someone from Marietta contacted me. And so we've been in Marietta now for 3 years and love it. Great church. They treat us really well. I really loved it.
Now let's jog back over to when you met Brad.
Okay.
And where was that, and how did that come about that you were such good friends that he would call you as the very first, most important speaker we had at
I would not say that was what at my time. But anyway, when I went down to Houston, I was the involvement minister, and Brad had been hired just I think a couple months before that as the youth minister. And so we were part of the same staff, and it was just a great time. We had I think a really unique church staff. We had 4 guys that were good friends in and out of the office, and that was some really good times. And so that's where I met Brad, and we've been good friends ever since.
Did you jog around the world with him?
I did not. No, that was
man,
long before I ever met him. I would have liked to.
That just sounded so exciting.
Yeah.
That he had so many of those experiences around the world
Yeah.
with the youth and with a lot of things going on. So you met him there, and you just knit together as good friends do.
Yeah.
And then you stayed in touch while you went on to Marietta, Georgia.
Yeah. Yeah.
And has it been what you thought it would be to be a minister, a preacher?
It has. You can't anticipate everything, because it's just, in ministry, you never know what's going to come up.
Non-anticipatory things that you dealt with?
Well, I mean, I say that. I guess the good thing for me has been, I've got some great shepherds, and so our eldership is really strong. And good elders take a lot of bullets for their ministers. They protect us and have our back in a lot of ways. And so I really have enjoyed that at Burnt Hickory. And so I've loved the preaching. I think probably the one thing I did not anticipate, which I should have, was Sunday comes every week. And one of the hardest things about preaching is you can feel good about something you've done on a Sunday, and by Sunday night you realize, what, I have to do that again another week. There's no conclusion. There's never a completion there. And so that is one of the hardest things is you've got to stay up. You've got to, be prepared every week for that next Sunday to come around. But I can't complain about any of it. It's been a good church and good experience.
Been the most, disappointing thing? There must be something disappointing about being a preacher.
I guess
minister.
There's good and bad. There is something I've discovered, and this is new to me because I've only been preaching for 3 years. There is something about preaching that you can only credit to God, and the reason I say that is when it's good in a good sense. There are times when I have preached a sermon, and I knew it wasn't a great sermon, and I knew it just it wasn't anything really special, but you have that one person come up and say, "You said what I really needed to hear today." And then that was all worth it. The 25 hours you put into writing that thing, that was worth it. But I also hopefully have the humility to know that was not me, that was God. There are times that people hear something in a sermon that I don't think I'd put in there. But I think they're hearing God. I don't think they're hearing me. Now, the downside of that is at times you will give a sermon and someone will come up and ask a question about what you said, and you wonder if they were even in the same room. Think, how did you get that out of what I said? That was not what I said at all. And so, it is funny how at times you can click with someone, and I think it's a God thing. I think they're hearing God, not you. And there are other times where you wonder where their head was for 98% of your sermon because obviously they weren't tracking with what you were saying. So I guess that's what I mean about the surprising power of what a sermon can do.
I remember one minister we had at one time, and he came on stage. Now, our sweet Dr. Brad Cox does a lot of the same thing. He will have, incredible uh, illustrations that he uses and people. And this guy came on and he had some luggage behind him. He's pulling. I'm sure you've seen that example. And behind that was another piece of luggage. And he said that every person that's listening in this room is bringing their own luggage, not only to a
Oh, yeah.
marriage, but also to a sermon.
Oh, yeah.
And they're hearing it from what they just went through that week.
Yep.
And so that's why I think they could hear things that are wonderful. You didn't remember saying that?
Yeah.
And things that are, how in the world did you get that out of that? How do you come up with these illustrations, the things that you do? Have you ever seen Brad preach?
I have.
He is the most unique,
He is.
innovative human I have ever known. And I think, how could he do that in 1 week?
I know.
Have that all together.
I know.
So do you like doing those things?
Oh, absolutely.
You can't forget it.
Exactly, and that's why I'm a very visual person too. The difference is Brad can do all the construction. Brad thinks on a scope that is
Unbelievable.
Hollywood size. That I don't build entire ships and all this stuff, but I do think have the same approach. And I hear a lot from our people about that. I think most people are visual learners.
They are.
And so they want to grasp onto something. And so that's how I think, that's how I naturally teach. And when people come up to me and say that really clicked with me, or when they remember it, it's because of the visual usually. And so I've tried all sorts of things as well. I mean, we talked about being a part of the body of Christ. And so for that series, we have a couple doctors in our congregation, and I had one of them bring some internal organs.
Oh.
And on stage, I pulled out an actual human heart.
Okay.
And I said, and then I put it on a paper plate.
Mhm.
So, disconnected from the body, this heart isn't much. And my point was, it's the same with us as Christians. If we're disconnected from the church, from Christ's body, we're not much. Now, some people were getting a little bit green watching. I could tell I was about to make some people sick, but I guarantee they all remembered that lesson.
You got that right.
And so, anytime you can find something like that, it's going to be a good lesson. So yeah, I've used several things like that. I've used human hearts. I've released live butterflies on stage. We've done all sorts of stuff. So yeah.
Bubbles.
Not bubbles, but
Been blowing bubbles. Leave that to the people getting married.
yes.
What do you think that, going back to your losing your job, what do you think people can do in addition to the things you said that can make it possible that they could get that next? Should they go through retraining? Is that one thing that could happen to people that lost their job? In addition to all the things, we're going to recap those. Let's go over what you can do when you lose a job. Or like here, especially in North Alabama and a lot of areas of this last few tornadoes, hundreds anyway, is that the place is blown away.
Right.
The place of worship, or the place of, where they work, is no longer in existence.
Right.
So let's go over what you can do. Just recap what you said.
Okay.
You can do.
Of course, it depends on your situation in terms of retraining. I can't say, yes, that's what you definitely need to do. I mean, that's one possibility. I would say that the best advice is you're not going to be able to do this alone. Networking is so important. And it's an old adage, but it's so true. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And so most people do a really lousy job of finding their next job while they're still employed. They haven't networked. They haven't thought ahead about what happens if I lose this one. And so most people, they're caught in that dilemma once they are unemployed. If that's where you are, you need to find, there's all sorts of churches and different agencies that will do networking seminars and also just networking groups. And so go online, to a library, talk to somebody in the government employment agencies, but they can direct you to those groups. Go there, and typically what happens at those sort of groups, you will be able to connect to other people in your industry. They will bring in people who are employers or who are possibly hiring to do presentations. Here's what I'm looking for. So find a networking group. That's the best advice I can give you. Secondly, do not be embarrassed. There's no shame in being unemployed. One thing I learned is when I was unemployed, I was shocked at how many people I talked to who were very successful, the type that you'd think always were, doing everything right, who had also been unemployed. There's no shame in it. And so
But you were at one time ashamed. In fact,
sure I
you
was,
told,
yeah.
You told a little white fib to somebody
Yeah.
when they asked you
Yeah.
how to, because you just hate to say, what do you do? Oh, duh.
Yeah.
But couldn't you say what your past experience was, or
Mhm.
what your degree's in, or
Mhm.
something, or what something in addition to I'm available for a new opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what career coaches will call it is your elevator pitch. In 30 seconds, you should be able to tell someone, "Here's what I've done. Here's what I'm looking for." Practice that. Get that down until when you're meeting
You do
somebody.
that?
Oh, I would now. Yeah, I
Uh-huh.
didn't then. I didn't do anything right when I was unemployed, but I've
Well,
learned
I
all this
remember
since
one
then.
guy said, if you're going to percolate, you got to circulate.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely,
Join the
absolutely.
chamber, the Business Network International group, whatever group, exchange, barter exchange, whatever it takes
Yeah.
to be a part of that. What would your elevator speech be, or somebody's elevator speech?
Well, I mean, I think, like I said, just in 20 or 30 seconds, be able to tell them, this is my name, this is what I've done, this is what I'm looking for. Have those resumes available and ready, and get the word out. I mean, again, there's no shame in being unemployed. So just broadcast, I'm looking for a job. Talk to your friends, your relatives, use that network that you have. Other advice would be, in terms of the home front, if you're married, you need to have a plan. You need to sit down with your spouse and come to an understanding of, this is how we're going to look for this job. And part of that plan, that understanding, has to be, my job is finding the next job.
How did Sherry take that? Now, she's got a 2-month-old baby,
Yeah.
and she's going to work.
Yeah.
How did she take that?
She was great, and the credit's all to her, not to me. My attitude was pretty bad at that time, and I'm embarrassed to say that, but it was. I've matured a lot since then. But she was the one that was going out. She was the one earning the bacon and bringing it home, being the mom, and she was very supportive. I really appreciate her for that.
And now you have not only that child, but another child.
Yep.
They're teenagers now, aren't they?
Yes. We've got
What's
an 8th
their
grader.
names?
Darby will be in 8th grade, and Roxy will be in 4th grade.
Okay, well, Darby's not quite. See, Darby is the younger one.
Darby's the older one.
Older one, and it's Roxy.
Yeah,
that's the
8th
fourth.
grade and 4th grade.
I
Right.
remember my little granddaughter said, when we were all sitting around the table, all adults, what do you want to be when you want to go to college? No. What do you want to do? You want to get married? No. What do you want to do? Stay home with mommy? No. I just want to go to the 4th grade.
Yep.
So we just went that next level, and you are a person that went to the 4th grade and on through college, and now preaching at a preaching minister. Oh, I wanted to ask you so much about at Burnt Hickory Church of Christ in Marietta, Georgia, and I know we don't have time, but maybe in 30 seconds, why are they called shepherd elders and why do you call them shepherds instead of just elders and deacons? I grew up with elders and deacons. I
Yeah.
never heard shepherds till
Yeah.
I came
Yeah.
to Twickenham.
It's a very biblical term,
Oh,
and I
yes, it
think
is.
it's probably one of the best terms to describe what their role is
That's
in the
true.
church, and what the nature and the heart of the man is that they should fulfill that role. Yeah.
Well, possibly his children are sleeping away or enjoying being with Dr. Brad Cox's family, and what a precious family that is. And we're glad that you joined us. And if you would like to know more about Scott Franks, I don't know, there's a scott.f@burnthickory.org.
Mhm.
So you can get back in touch with him like that. And we're glad that you joined us. I am Bonnie Liphart, along with, believe it or not, Dr. Brad Cox is running camera because Tony had to go to an appointment. And they got here at 7 a.m., if you can believe such a thing. And Scott Franks, the preaching minister. And if you'd like to have a copy of this DVD, just get in touch with us. You'll see the toll-free number running across the bottom of your screen, 877-823-6886. And God bless you. Have a beautiful day.